Hi class, over the next couple of days you guys are going to be working on square roots and the Pythagorean theorem. You probably remember hearing the Pythagorean theorem from last year in 7th grade, but I thought this would be a really good time for you to go over it. If you take a look at the 6 warm-up questions on the board, I actually have the answer to question 2 already up on the board. These are called square roots. And as you guys might remember from before, a square root is whenever you find two numbers that are exactly the same, then when you multiply them together, give you the number under the square root sign. There is a button like this on your calculator. You might have to push the second button and then find the square root button to get that. But for example, if we take a look at question number 2, for example, this one right here. You see how there's a positive and there's a negative number on the outside, a positive and negative sign on the outside of the radical? That means that there's technically two answers to this problem. I want a positive root and I want a negative root for this answer. So for example, 30 times 30 will give me 900, but so will negative 30 times negative 30 to give you 900. So take a moment right now and I want you to see if you can find the square root button on your calculator, and I want you to also pay attention to the sign if there is a sign on the outside of each square root sign. For example, if I take a look at number 1, there's no sign on the outside, so you can assume that you just want the positive root. Same with number 3. But on number 4, I want only the negative root. On number 5, I want the positive and negative root. And for number 6, I want the negative root only. So take a moment right now and copy down what your calculator is telling you for numbers 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if you take a look, guys, I have the answers now up here on the board. The positive root of 1.44 is 1.2 because 1.2 times 1.2 will give you 1.44. Same like if you have a fraction, you can type this in as one big thing in your calculator, or you can think about it as what's the square root of 4 over the square root of 9. Square root of 4 is 2, square root of 9 is 3, and you want the positive root, so 2/3 times 2/3 will give you 4/9. This one again we said we wanted the negative root. So the negative root of 441 is negative 21, because negative 21 times negative 21 will give you 441. And number 5, the positive and negative root of 484, positive 22 and negative 22, because positive 22 times positive 22 will give you 484, and negative 22 times negative 22 will give you positive 484. Likewise for number 6, we want the negative root of 2,500. So our calculator will give us positive 50, but since I want the negative root, I'm going to say negative 50 times negative 50 will give me 2,500. In this lesson today, you guys are going to be learning about the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem only relates to right triangles. And remember, to make a triangle a right triangle, it has to have a right angle. We're going to talk about these different sides and why I have a silly picture of a hypotenuse up here in a moment. But for right now, guys, copy down the title of the lesson. It's called the Pythagorean theorem. And your essential question is, how are the lengths of the sides of a right triangle related? So again, I told you guys that the Pythagorean theorem only relates to right triangles. In order to make a triangle a right triangle, it has to have a right angle, so a 90-degree angle. The other sides that we call here on the triangle are called the legs of the triangle. But this side right here, the reason why we have this hippo right here is because this is called the hypotenuse, and sometimes people have a hard time trying to say it. So if you think about a hippo, think about the hippo laying on the right triangle. This special side that is directly across from the right angle, that's going to be called the hypotenuse. Alright, so again, if we take a look at our notes now, let's look at some vocabulary to help us with the right triangle. I had mentioned that the two sides that are right next to the right angle are called the legs, and these two sides are interchangeable. They are also the shortest sides of the right triangle. The hypotenuse is the one that is directly across from the right angle, so right here. You can draw the arrow also so that you don't make that mistake. This is the opposite side of the right angle. This is also, you might want to write this down, the longest side whenever you're taking a look at the measurements in a right triangle. How the Pythagorean theorem works in words, it says in any right triangle, the sum of the squares of the lengths of the legs is equal to the square of the length of the hypotenuse. So in basic formula terms, we've got a squared plus b squared equals c squared. You can interchange the two legs, so the two shorter sides of the right triangle, as much as you want, but the longest side has to be all by itself on the side of the equal sign. So a squared and b squared, these are the legs. C squared is your hypotenuse. So when we take a look at a picture with a right triangle in it, and we're asked to figure out what an unknown missing length is, the very first thing I want you to do every single time is locate where your right angle is, and I want you to draw an arrow to point to the side that is the hypotenuse. So when we take a look at the formula, let's write it down. It's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The hypotenuse always goes in for c. Okay, so we're going to do this first, and I'm going to use a different color. So they actually are giving us the variable of c, so I'm going to plug that in for c. The other two sides I see, one is 5, one is 12. It technically does not matter the order that you plug them in for, so we'll say that 5 is for A, and we'll say 12 is in for B. All you have to do now is you have to simplify what's on the left-hand side to figure out what C is, or the missing length of the hypotenuse. So this, remember guys, is a square. There's also a button for that on your calculator, not to be confused with square root. But you would do 5 times 5, which will give us 25. And then you would do 12 times 12, because it's 12 squared, which is going to give me 144. And that equals c squared. Next thing we're going to do is simplify these together. So 25 and 144, that's going to give me 169. And that equals c squared. We are not finished yet because we still have to get rid of this square term that's right here. You're trying to solve for c, you're not trying to solve for c squared. So what we need to do is get rid of the square root, or get rid of a square. How you get rid of a square is by square rooting. So that's why you had that warm-up question. Remember, what you do to one side, you have to do the other, so draw the square root on both sides. Since we're talking about a length, we only want a positive root. So type in your calculator the square root of 169, or what are two numbers that are exactly the same that'll give you 169? And the answer is 13. We're going to take a look at the units that's in the problem. Since it's an M, we're going to put 13 meters as the correct answer for C. Next thing we're going to do, guys, take a look at another one. Again, you want to draw the arrow to first show you which side is the hypotenuse, which is going to be the side that's all by itself when you plug in. So again, write down the formula, 8 squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, remember this side c has to be all by itself, so we're going to plug that in from this side. And we can interchange the other two numbers as much as we want for a and b. So we'll say that this is 3, and we'll say this one is 4. So far we have 3 squared plus 4 squared equals c squared. 3 squared, if you simplify that on your calculator, is 9. 4 squared is 16. That equals c squared. 9 plus 16 will give us 25. That equals c squared. And again, I'm not trying to solve for c squared, I'm trying to solve for c. So you have to square root both sides to get rid of that square. So what number times what number gives you 25? And the correct answer is 5. Again, you're going to make sure you put your units on there, so 5 inches would be the correct answer for side C. I know that I'm correct because if I take a look at the other two lengths that are in the picture, these two are much smaller than 5, so therefore I found the longest side, the hypotenuse, and my answer seems reasonably correct. Next, guys, I'd like you to try out these two on your own questions. Again, draw the arrow to see what side is the hypotenuse in the picture. In both of these, you are going to be solving for the hypotenuse. So the C will be all by itself. Just so you know for future reference, it doesn't always have to be a C here. It can be any variable or any number. So take a couple moments right now, pause the video, and I'd like you guys to try out these two on your own. Hi guys, hopefully you got those correct. If you take a look at the work up on the board, the 8 and the 15 would be the legs in problem for question number 1, and I have the C as being all by itself for the hypotenuse. So we'd have 8 squared plus 15 squared equals c squared. Solving, I'm going to get 289 equals c squared, and then again square rooting to both sides to get 17 feet for an answer for your hypotenuse. And number 2, you have fractions, but you're going to treat them the same as if you were whole numbers. I just put them in parentheses so that you can see that when you square them, you actually square the entire fraction, not the numerator. So we have 2/5 squared plus 3/10 squared equals c squared. In solving, we have 1/4 equals c squared, and then we're going to square root both sides to get 1/2 for your answer for your hypotenuse. Again, that number is the longest out of both, including on both of these, so that means our answer at least seems reasonably correct. Not always are you going to have to find for the hypotenuse. Sometimes a leg might be missing. So if you take a look at this one, and I start drawing that line to get me to the side of the hypotenuse, that means that this 2.9 is my c. So when I plug in for a squared plus b squared equals c squared, that means the 2.9 is going to be all by itself this time. So that means solving this is going to be a little bit different. So we already know 2.9 has to be on this side here all by itself. It doesn't matter what you're plugging in for the other two in terms of the order, we just know that they have to be on this side. So I'm going to plug a in for a, and I'm going to plug 2.1 in for b. Alright, so if I'm using my calculator right now, I can't simplify anything more with a, so I'm just going to leave that as a squared. Now I'm going to do 2.1 squared, which is going to give me 4.41. And then if I take a look at the other side, I have 2.9 squared, so if I plug that in my calculator, I'm going to get 8.41. Ignoring the square sign in the problem, this looks like a one-step equation that we know how to solve. If I'm trying to get this a squared term all by itself, you have to get rid of the plus. Oops. So what you're going to do, how do you get rid of adding 4.41? You would subtract 4.41 to both sides. So when you do this, you get these to cancel. You're going to bring down your a squared, and 8.41 minus 4.41 will give me 4. I'm not done yet. I have to square root it, right? I know my answer doesn't make sense because if I'm solving for a leg, which is the shorter side, my answer has to be smaller than 2.9, and right now it's not. So I'm going to square root both sides, and I'm going to, let's see, what number times what number gives me 4, and the correct answer would be 2. Again, you can plug that into your calculator, but my final answer would be 2 centimeters. Trying one more, again drawing the right angle with the arrow to show me that this side is the hypotenuse, so that means when I'm plugging into the formula, this 25 has to be all by itself. So we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Alright, let's say I'm going to plug in b for b, so I'm going to have b squared here. I'll have 7 for a, because it is a leg. So I have 7 squared plus b squared equals 25 squared. Okay, simplifying, 7 times 7 is 49, plus b squared. And then 25 times 25 is going to be 625. So in order to get this b squared term all by itself, I need to get rid of adding 49. So to get rid of adding 49, I'm going to subtract 49 to both sides. So these will cancel. I'm going to be left with b squared equals, okay, 625 minus 49 is going to give me 576. That answer does not make any sense right now, right? Because I want my answer to be smaller than 25 feet. So I'm going to square root 576 from both sides, or 576 from both sides. And I'm going to get up the answer right now that makes more sense. It is 24. It is smaller than the hypotenuse side, so that it means that it's reasonable. And I'm going to throw on the feet sign. So my answer for this is 24 feet. So right now, guys, if you're taking a look at your notes, you've got 2 more on your own questions. I'd like you right now to take a moment right now, pause the video, and see if you can figure